The Kansas City Chiefs are going to have a significantly different feel to them in 2018. After 5 years, Alex Smith is gone, traded to the Washington Redskins. In to take over the reins is going to be last year's first-round pick, the 10th overall selection out of Texas Tech, the quarterback Patrick Mahomes. There's no Marcus Peters. This will be an interesting team to watch in 2018. And when you look at the Chiefs in this year's draft, you're coming into it at a bit of a deficit, obviously, without having the first-round pick. And in an ideal world, you'd love to have your first-round pick every single year. Sometimes, though, it's okay to go without one if you utilize it properly. And when I look at what the Chiefs did last year, going from 27 to 10 to get that quarterback, it was worth giving up the pick at 22 overall in this year's draft. It was a really good place to be because the Chiefs feel like, hey, we're probably still a playoff team this year, so the first-round pick we're giving up next year is not going to have the same value as maybe other quarterback-desperate teams that would give up a pick in next year's draft. And they were right. They were a playoff team, and they had reason to believe that they would be, and they were. So giving up the 22nd overall pick this year to move up from 27 to 10 last year to get the guy who was, in my opinion, the best quarterback in that draft class, I don't feel like that was too big of a price. And I feel like ultimately when you look at this Chiefs draft in 2018, the single most important thing is that Patrick Mahomes becomes that guy. Because they did ship off a somewhat productive, winning starting quarterback in Alex Smith. So there's definitely risk there. And I know I'm not the biggest Alex Smith guy, and I will point out flaws and logic defending him and flaws in his game and so forth. But he was a consistent guy. He was a reliable guy to a certain degree. He also was coming off of his most productive season in his career in 2017. Trading him away has to be considered a risk. I feel like it's a worthy risk. I feel like in a couple of years it won't matter to Chiefs fans. But right now, it's a risky play. But it is also the Chiefs acknowledging and understanding that it's not just Alex Smith's fault alone. Clearly, absolutely not. But ultimately, they also knew that they weren't going all the way with Alex Smith, and that's just the way it was, because if they were, they would have done it at some point in time in the 5 years he was there. They realized they had peaked, they had plateaued with him, and the only thing that could happen by continuing to go down the Alex Smith track is delaying the inevitable decline. And when that decline would come, it would come very quickly. So the Chiefs made the smart move last year to act. Get the young quarterback in the fold, get the guy with the most upside, get the guy with the most arm talent, and hope Andy Reid, the quarterback whisperer, can work with him. And you know, you can sit there and scoff at me for saying that, but this is a guy that's been around very productive, quality quarterbacks over the years. You know, you think about the Joe Montanas, the Steve Youngs of the world, or the Brett Favres of the world, Donovan McNabb. Alex Smith goes to Kansas City and has a bit of a resurgence in his career, really. You could say it started with Harbaugh, but it was slightly taken to a different level under Andy Reid. The guy has his flaws, his shortcomings, and he makes mistakes, sometimes at the worst possible moments and situations, but the simple fact of the matter is he does know offensive football, and he knows the quarterback position. So it's a really good situation to bring a young quarterback like Mahomes in with all this talent, but raw as hell, gunslinger. Now Andy Reid's had time to work with him, cultivate him, mold him, and it's going to be a fascinating Chiefs team to watch in 2018. And in large part, it's what you're evaluating this year's draft off of. Because if Mahomes works out, that's all that matters. When you look at the rest of the draft without the first-round pick, they were going to kind of be at a bit of a deficit here. You know, it's hard without that first-round pick to put together an effective class. Now, when I look at what the Chiefs did outside of trading away this first-round pick last year in order to get Mahomes, the second-round pick, Breeland speaks. I think that's a good pick and probably a round too early. I thought he was more of like a third-roundish type of guy. They took him in round 2, and then they fouled it right back up in round 3 by taking Derrick Nnadi from Florida State, who I thought was a second-round pick. So when all is said and done, if Derrick was the second-round pick and Breeland Speaks was the third-round pick, I probably have absolutely no issue with it at all. So I'm just going to kind of classify that as a wash. My bigger concern, though, is even if you want to talk about acquiring Kendall Fuller via trade, is I still felt like the secondary lacks talent, lacks depth, lacks speed, lacks athleticism, and they did not address that on day 2 of the draft, which I found absolutely startling. Like when they were trading up, I thought they might have been a type of team that traded up a little bit more to maybe get a guy like Josh Jackson from Iowa, who I put the comparison on of Marcus Peters, without maybe some of the baggage. I was really surprised that they waited until round 4 to address it, and when they did, it was the safety position, not corner. I was really surprised with that. I was also surprised that they took Dorian O'Daniel at the end of round 3. He's a smaller inside backer for them. He can move around, but I thought somebody like a Jossie Jewell was a better player. I thought there was better value on the board, but with O'Daniel, he has a chance to be a future starter inside, so it might not matter that much. Armani Watts in round 4 feels like a solid, not necessarily spectacular, but still solid pick. I thought the greatest cockblock move of the entire draft weekend, though, happened when the Chiefs traded up in round 6 to go get Reggie McKenzie, the general manager of the Raiders, draft his son, Kahlil McKenzie, the defensive tackle out of Tennessee. That was such a great, epic cockblock move. But it still was puzzling to me. Speaks and Nnadi, no question, and McKenzie as well, fit the profile of Andy Reid coach teams over the years, that they love to invest heavily in the trenches, offensively and defensively. And this year was on the defensive side of the ball. And look, I'm not saying they didn't need help on the defensive side of the ball. They most certainly did. But it was really curious to me that you didn't have a first-round pick. You ended up with 6 total picks. You're trading up in round 2 to get Breeland Speaks. And you invest 3 of those 6 picks in the defensive line when you were a 3-4 team. Again, coming off of taking whatever the fuck his name was, Tano last year from Villanova. I'm drawing a blank right now. Passagno or whatever the hell it was. And don't they have Chris Jones too? Like, you can only play so many of these defensive linemen at a time. And maybe it's a feeling of they stuck true to their board. But it feels like maybe you should have manipulated your board a little bit better. Just my opinion. I don't expect a whole ton of impact coming out of this draft class. You just look at it, it's not that overwhelming. But a big part of the grade of how you look at this draft ultimately will be how Patrick Mahomes develops and whether or not he pans out. Because if he did, that can still help make this draft class look not so bad.